will tell you ancient Egyptian civilization emerged from inner African sources, and that the racial identity of the ancient Egyptians, all of them, until the very latest period of Egyptian history, with the conquest of the Greeks, the Romans, and then later the Arabs, that all of the inhabitants of the ancient Nile Valley are what we would today describe as black people. Historians talk, speculation? No, documented, archaeological evidence, comparative historical linguistics, all of the different disciplines of modern Africanist study. This is not simply Afrocentric scholars pioneering the way. This is every scholar now that teaches ancient African history at any North American university will tell you that the ancient Egyptians were black. But you know who else said that the ancient Egyptians were black? And who said that Musa alayhi salatu wasalam was black? The prophet did. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now, you might not know that most of the main characters in the Quranic text happen to be black for a very simple and basic reason, which is that the Quran is a colorblind book. It never mentions skin color or hair texture once, which is how you know that God wrote that book and not a man. Because when people start writing books, they start divvying things up. They start preferring their tribe over others. They start changing the story, and they start changing the physical appearances of people, ranking people hierarchically. We'll get to that in a moment. But let's just point out the fact that the Quran itself has only one partial reference to skin color in it for any of its main characters. We'll come back to the crowd for this one. What's the one color reference referring to a person in the Quran? Not Adam. Why? Because the word Adam in ancient Arabic means dark brown or black in color. Indeed, the linguists of the ancient Arabic language said that when Adam is used in reference to a human being, it is a skin color descriptor that you use when the darkness of their skin exceeds asmar shadidul asmara. So it exceeds intensely brown in color. In other words, when somebody is too dark for you to call them chocolate brown, you call them Adam. Adam, the shared ancestor of all of us, black, brown, red, white, yellow, and everything in between, was black. In the Quranic text, just as historical research, genealogical research has established, humanity begins in Africa, tropical Africa, where you have to be black in order to survive. So who else is described as Adam, not by the Quranic text, but by the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam? Musa is. Adam Shadidul Udma is how he described the skin color of Moses, which is to say, even darker than chocolate brown, intensely Adam in color, followed with an intensifier. So now let's just start thinking through the stories in the Quran and about Bani Israel being in Egypt, in Africa, a jet black Egypt for 426 solar years, which is the time that the exegetes say passed between the time that Sayyidina Yusuf brought Bani Israel into Egypt and the time that Sayyidina Musa brought them out. What did Bani Israel look like in that time? Not the way that they look now. The Prophet ﷺ described for you what Moses looked like. The exegetes of the Quran are of the majority opinion, vast majority opinion, almost unanimous opinion, but certainly vast majority opinion, that Sayyidina Suleiman was similarly dark-skinned, very dark, intensely black in color. When we're reading these narrations about these figures that lived either in the Horn of Africa, in the Nile Valley, or in the surrounding regions, we're not populating it with black faces, dark skin. We're imagining a bunch of Arabs, aren't we? Because the Quran is in Arabic. But why is the Quran in Arabic? إِنَّ أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. We sent it as an Arabic Quran so that y'all would understand it, so that y'all would reason with it. is what God says at the beginning of Surah Yusuf. The Arabocentric, the ethnocentric presentation of the religion causes us to make a fetish of the Arabic language of the Quran. But of course, most of the dialogue in the Quran wasn't in Arabic. Most of the dialogue in the Quran was in African languages. Oh, y'all thought that in Surah Yusuf, when the women of Egypt cut their hands gazing on the beauty of Joseph and felt no pain, that they actually said, "Qulna hasha lillahi ma hada basharan in hada illa malakun kareem." Beautiful. God's Arabic is perfect, but that ain't what them women said, because they did not speak Arabic. They were speaking ancient Egyptian. They were speaking the Kemetic language. God told you, we made it an Arabic Quran so that y'all would understand it. Because you can't understand the hundreds of different African languages that are being spoken in the Quran. You don't know the Aramaic of Jesus, Afro-Asiatic language. You don't know the Akkadian language of Ibrahim, Afro-Asiatic language. You don't know the Mandaean language, a derivation of Aramaic, still spoken by the followers of John the Baptist in Iraq. You don't know all of those languages, so God is going to make this a clear Arabic Quran. Why? Because never did we send a messenger except in the language of their people. So this explication comes, this last guidance for humanity comes in this beautiful, eloquent Arabic, which we learn and we study in order to understand God's words and God's meanings. But we cannot attribute to that an importance that goes beyond understanding what was actually taking place in the history. Most of these people were Africans speaking African languages. They were speaking Hebrew, or Aramaic, as I mentioned. Break the hold that an ethnocentric conception of the faith has on your understanding, and you can start to get free. More briefly from Quran al-Kareem on this matter. And actually, this will take us to the heart of those racial understandings, those ethnically chauvinistic understandings that have tried to separate us from our past, that have tried to turn us into a people without history so that we'll come around begging, so that we'll come around hoping that we get included too, that during Black History Month, we can have a few words at the Mosque so that the Black folks get included into the story too. Never mind that the book that we all read is largely about them. We act, as though it's an act of charity to include Black people in the story, forgetting that the stories are mostly about Black people. I'm going to pause on that for a moment, because the worst part is that we accept it. Go back to Malcolm. Why do we accept it? Like Malcolm said, if the problem with the Negro is that if he sees a Negro selling ice and a white man selling ice, he's going to think that the white man's ice is colder. The problem with the Black Muslim is that if he sees an Arab speaking and a Black man speaking, he's going to think that the Arab is smarter, more knowledgeable. We have ingrained inferiority complexes that this brutal white supremacist society drills into our very hides. And we carry these complexes into our understandings of religion, and are happy to submit to people who call us abid under their breath. Why? Because we lack knowledge of self. Because we lack a critical understanding of the sacred text that's rooted in our traditions. We lack an emancipatory theology. Why do we have this lack? Why do we continue to submit? Because we keep falling for the oldest game, and that's the devil's game. Back to that dark brown